there's one of the elements that underlies the general critique of capitalism is that people are wage slaves.
Right, of course.
Right now, you can criticize that in that, well, slaves can't quit. And the critic would say, well, I can quit one job, but if I don't get another one, I'll starve.
Sure.
So like I'm in a slavery position, so to speak. Now, I think the most effective way of countering that is likely that if you're not charting your own destiny, then you are a slave.
But I think there's a big difference, and this is why the Exodus metaphor does not apply here. I think a lot of people want the cage. I think H.L. Mencken is right that the average man... Wait, hold on. H.L. Mencken... H.L. Mencken said the average man doesn't want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. You don't see that in Exodus. The Jews wanted to escape Egypt. There were none of them that stayed behind. They go, oh, I got it pretty good here under Pharaoh. They all want to be free.
Right.
And that's not accurate.
But they do, they're lost in the desert because that's part of what happens on the way to freedom, so to speak. They do get whiny as hell.
Oh, hell yeah.
They pine for the days when the tyrant told them what to do. They said, well, at least we had like a variety. They're getting manna from heaven, right? They said, well, we don't have onions and garlic anymore, even though they're getting heavenly food. So they do revert to that slave, what would you say, that longing for slavery. And I do agree that is, part of the reason, this is something that I think is really worth discussing with you. Part of the reason that people are wage slaves, let's say, is because they don't want to take on the responsibility of charting their own course. Now, I think people often also don't know how. Like our school systems, for example, were set up to not teach people to do that.
It's the Bismarck model where they wanted to make everyone homogenized to little soldiers. It's funny how one of the things I love about social media and kind of new media is that it allows people to question things they never thought to even question for their whole life. I'll give you a parallel example. The great leader Kim Il-sung, who founded North Korea, he had a big tumor on the back of his neck. It was too close to his spine to operate.
That was the alien control mechanism.
And it got bigger and bigger throughout his life, and he was always photographed from this angle. And I heard differing accounts about whether North Koreans knew about this. And I met a refugee, and I said to her, did you know about this thing? She goes, oh yeah, it was an old war injury. And I said, why would a war injury get bigger throughout his life? And she just stopped, and she's like, holy crap. She never questioned, and she knew on the face it was a lie, but she never questioned that it was a lie. Let's look about education. Why are we all going to school at the same time and learning everything at the same pace? It makes no sense. You might be better at math. I might be better at, history.
In age-graded groups.
Yes, it makes, and when you stop and think, you go, especially with technology nowadays, you can have dynamic testing. Okay, once a month you test, you stay here, you get extra help. That's fine. You can read ahead, but somehow we all have to start school at the same time, study everything at the same rate, and people who are worse than others, or not through any fault of their own, are punished. It makes no sense, but we never question it. And now, thanks to podcasts, things like this, you'd be like, wait a minute, this is kind of weird, isn't it? Why does everyone have to learn everything at the same rate and at the same time?
Well, you know that the school systems were established in accordance with the Prussian military model.
Yes, of course.
And that the goal there was to make obedient soldiers and really, literally to crush out any proclivity towards individual striving.
Just one more thing. There's a book called Illiberal Reformers, which talks about this at length. It's amazing the boner Western leftists have for European ideas. Like they went over to Prussia, they saw this, and because it's foreign, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is next gen. Same thing happened a couple generations later with Lenin and the communists. It's like, okay, it's from overseas. It must be better than our stupid American values is how they perceived it. And the consequences have been absolutely disastrous. Like if you ask most conservatives in 2019, could COVID have happened in America, the lockdowns and all the submission, they would have laughed in your face. But they ran the experiment. They have the data. Their theory was wrong. People are docile.
I was shocked at the degree of, my conclusion observing Toronto during the COVID was that 70% of Canadians would have worn a mask for the rest of their life. And I would say 30% of them would have worn that mask happily if they could have continued informing on their neighbors.
Oh, yeah. And the thing that's crazy to that is Canada is not a hospitable country. It's a nation of frontiersmen. And look at Scotland. Like what happened to these peoples?
Or Australia.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
And now they're castrati.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we did get rid of Trudeau today.
Yeah, but I mean, this
That's
is kind of, this is ripping. I mean, first of all, I think it's kind of crappy of him to set up his successor to take a major loss. Like Kim Campbell had to face, it was in 93.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I'm sure there's room for hope with Pierre, but he's a symptom. He's not the cancer. Don't you think?
Yes. Yeah. Hey, man, Canadians voted for him. And I would say that the default Canadian, if presented with his policies one by one, would still agree with virtually all of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's true of the Conservatives as well.
Of course, yes.
You know, the malaise is very, very deep.